I think the birth story really needs to start with understanding that I had a very clear birth plan. And this is really lesson number one, right? Everything in our life begins with intention. And so I had a very clear intention with the way that I wanted to experience labor. And everything I did during my pregnancy was preparing me for that. And you can think about having a plan as a preference, right? Having preferences, birth preferences. What do you prefer to have happen during that time? And in life, it's important that we have preferences, right? That we have a plan, that we have an intention set for what we wish to experience. And so I had a very clear plan. And in reflection of it, I really didn't share my birth plan with anyone other than my doula, my husband, and my mom, because those were the three people that were going to be there to bring it to fruition.
Welcome, Badass Manifester. I am so glad you are here. I'm your host and head coach, Ashley Gordon, master mindset and manifestation biz expert, founder of the quantum coaching certification, and multiple six-figure entrepreneur obsessed with empowering you to create quantum leaps in your energy, your life, and your business. This is the show to help you make magic your everyday normal, where the ripple effect is real and the guest experts are world class. My mission is to power your conscious and subconscious mind with manifestation teachings, business tools, and coaching techniques to put your potential into action. Consider this your weekly up level. Are you ready for quantum transformation? Let's do this.
How I have missed my badass manifesting family so much. I'm really pumped to share our birth story today of how Maverick Sol Gordon entered the world. I'm so pumped. So it's interesting because I recorded this podcast before and somehow it got deleted off of my computer. It was gone and I was so sad about it. But after sitting with it, I was like, okay, the universe wants me to deliver these messages in a slightly different way. And the transmission, of course, came out a bit different this time. So again, going with the flow. I'm so excited. As I record this right now, currently I'm 11 weeks postpartum, and next week I'll have a 3-month-old baby. I just can't even believe it. It's flown by, and it's been honestly the best experience of my life. I absolutely love being a mom. I love being his mama. And it is such a joy every single day. And I'm still on maternity leave as I record this podcast. So my full-time job right now is taking care of Maverick, and I could not be happier doing it. Todd and I, every single night before we go to bed, look at each other and we're like, wow, this was totally worth the wait. Like completely worth the wait. And for those of you who are just joining in on this journey that I'm entering into motherhood, if you haven't been up to date on the journey it took to get here, it took us over 3 years to conceive. We did 2 rounds of IVF, and it's been quite the journey to get to this point. And yeah, it was just completely worth the wait. Every single piece of heartache, every single tear that was shed was worth it. And the way that I am wanting to express this episode is to make it as potent and impactful for you as the listener as possible. Because I can give you the details of a story, right? Because people want to know birth stories. We're nosy. We want to know what happened. And I get that. But there's also a ton of lessons along the way. And that's really what this transmission is about. It's about the lessons that happened to me during this labor experience that will also be a benefit to you. And that is my goal for this podcast. I want to share my story, but also give you the lessons and the codes that I received for you to take and use in your own life. And even if you can't relate to giving birth and maybe never will give birth, you will still benefit from the lessons and the transformations that I'm going to deliver in this show. I think the birth story really needs to start with understanding that I had a very clear birth plan. And this is really lesson number one, right? Everything in our life begins with intention. And so I had a very clear intention with the way that I wanted to experience labor. And everything I did during my pregnancy was preparing me for that. And you can think about having a plan as a preference, right? Having preferences, birth preferences. What do you prefer to have happen during that time? And in life, it's important that we have preferences, right? That we have a plan, that we have an intention set for what we wish to experience. And so I had a very clear plan. And in reflection of it, I really didn't share my birth plan with anyone other than my doula, my husband, and my mom, because those were the three people that were going to be there to bring it to fruition. But my plan was to have a natural hospital birth. And so that's the book I was reading. There's a book called Natural Hospital Birth. And that was my plan. My plan was to find a doula, which I did, who would labor with me at home for as long as possible and then go to the hospital and transfer to the hospital with me and labor there and, finish the whole shebang. And so I wanted to be home for as long as possible in order to be as dilated as possible, in order to stay in my home environment, to allow my body to open up as much as it possibly could before going to the hospital. And that was my goal. I didn't want any interventions. I didn't want Pitocin. I didn't want an epidural. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to go natural and deliver at the hospital. I knew that I wanted my mom in the room, Todd in the room, and my doula in the room. And that is basically the plan that I had in place. And my preferences were, I wanted the lights down low in the hospital. I wanted my oil diffuser going. I wanted my playlist flowing. I didn't want to be constantly monitored. I didn't want to be hooked up to anything. I wanted to be in the tub. I wanted to be moving around and being able to use my body and move my body. I wanted to be as free as possible in the birthing process and feel like I was in a safe space once I got to the hospital to do all the things that I was already doing at home. Okay. So now that you have that in mind, this is what happened and how it all went down. So we have to really start at around 40 weeks because I thought that I was going early. I think every mom thinks that they're going to have their baby early. Initially, it was a fear of preterm labor, and then it turned into, okay, you're full term now. Baby can come any day. And I was just waiting. And I had a friend who told me, she's like, well, just wait. Wait until everything is done. Everything's done in the baby's room. All the clothes are washed. Everything is complete. And all you're doing is just waiting. I'm like, oh my God, okay. And that's what it was. It was like that energy of waiting. And we all know in manifestation, when we're waiting, right, we're in that space of not having it happen now. And so that was the space I was in. It was a very anxious space for me. I didn't like not knowing when he was going to come. It was definitely a learning process for me of just releasing control and letting go of the outcome. Obviously, we knew the outcome was going to be I was going to have a baby. It's just a matter of when, right? When is it going to happen? And that's so relatable to any of us who have manifestations that we are waiting for. Like, when is it going to happen? Are you in that waiting energy or are you in that creating energy? And so really getting a hit on like where you're at is so important for the manifestation to come to fruition. So anywho, my mom lives in Florida, so I was flying her in. I flew her in 10 days before my due date. My due date was November 16th. And every day we're getting up in the morning and we're like, okay, we're one day closer. And she would look at my belly and she would say, okay, Maverick, put your clothes on. It's time to come out today. And we would just, say stuff like that every single day, waiting and thinking every night when I would go to sleep. Tonight's going to be the night I'm going to start contractions. Tonight's going to be the night I'm going to start contractions. And I actually kind of got a little crazy over it because I wanted it to happen so bad. I was so ready for it to happen, but I wasn't going into labor. And so when I went to the doctor for my 40-week appointment, she had talked about if I should need an induction, which is not part of my birth plan, right? Not my birth preference. And she said if we were to induce, it would be the day after Thanksgiving. And I was like, whoa. I definitely thought that my baby would be here before Thanksgiving. I always in my mind imagined having him with us, having at the table, sleeping, whatever. He was going to be there. Our little turkey was going to be there 100%. And it just kind of blew my mind to think, oh, I don't really want to get induced. I don't want to take that medicine. I don't want to have to, go through all of that. I wanted it to be a natural process. And so 40 plus 1 days, 40 plus 2, 40 plus 3, 40 plus 4, I'm like, where is this child? I just did not like the waiting. It was extremely unsettling to me for some reason. And so I knew that this was presenting itself for a reason. I'm like, okay, let's get our mindset right here. You're having a baby, all is well, everything is fine. Why don't you just enjoy these last few days? And so I knew that I needed to let go. I needed to let go of when it was going to happen. And this is such a universal lesson for all of us, right? And for me, the act of letting go, it is an act. I have to do something physically with myself in order to release the energy that I'm holding on to very tightly. So for this, I decided to take a walk. And meanwhile, all those days where I'm waiting for baby, I'm taking lots of walks, right? I'm walking, I'm curb walking, I'm doing all the things to induce labor. But in particular, this walk, I wasn't trying to induce labor. I was walking with the sun in my face. I had my headphones on and I'm listening to this playlist that is like my spiritual playlist that I love so much. I'll link it for you in the show notes. It's such an amazing playlist, such a gift in my life. And I'm listening to my music and I'm just breathing and I'm feeling the brisk air on my face. And I'm just like, all of my dreams are coming true right now. Relax, let go. And so every few steps I would take, I would shake my hands out and I would just take a deep breath and I would do a big exhale. And finally I made it to the beach, 6 blocks away from my house. Meanwhile, I'm waddling. It is so uncomfortable to walk at this point, but I made it to the beach and I get down to the beach and I'm like, wow, this is like this could be my last moment in nature by myself, like with my baby in my belly, that I'm experiencing the beach like this. I'm never going to experience the beach like this again. It's going to be different from now on. And it was just all hitting me in that moment. And I was just singing and dancing and rejoicing in the energy of it's all happening and I don't need to make anything happen. I can just let go right now of the when and the how. It's all happening the way that it's supposed to. It's all happening for me. And it was just so beautiful. And I really, really let go of having it needing it to happen. And when I took this walk, I was 40 weeks and 3 days pregnant. And I really, really let it all go. And I got home and it was just such a beautiful rest of the day. I was just relaxing. I was watching Netflix. I was chilling. My mom was making me dinner. It was amazing. And it was a Friday. So what happened Friday night when I went to bed? Started getting contractions. I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel like a Braxton Hicks contraction. I was getting a ton of Braxton Hicks contractions. That doesn't feel like a Braxton Hicks. And it wasn't. I was starting contractions, but these contractions, they were really sporadic throughout the night, but they did wake me up from a sound sleep. So I knew that something was happening and my body was starting to do something. And so when that started happening, the contractions were like 40 minutes apart, then 15 minutes apart, then 30 minutes apart, then an hour apart. Nothing was, syncing up super close together. And they always say, you're in active labor when the contractions are super close together and super consistent. And these were not. But what was blowing my mind was how quickly the universe shifted. Because when I let go of having to have it happen, any sooner, immediately it happened. And what a lesson that is for all of us, right? When we need something to happen and we're trying and we're hoping and we're stressing over it and we're focusing on it so much and we have to have it happen. And then we let it go. The reality shifts because I changed my energy. And when you change your energy, you can change the reality. And so that's exactly what happened. I changed the reality and boom, I was in labor. I was so mind blown by it. But I really needed that lesson of letting go. I really, really needed that. So I believe that life is always showing us what we need in order to grow and evolve and shift and become who we are meant to be. And so life was definitely showing me what needed to shift, and I was open to seeing it instead of having it perpetuate in that same space. And maybe if I didn't let it go, I would have had to be induced. Who knows? But that's what started happening. So the contraction started happening Friday, and I did not sleep much that night at all into Saturday morning. And I started getting them even more and closer together, but nothing was consistent. And so I was texting my doula, and she was like, I think you might be in prenormal labor, which is just, it's kind of like a fake labor. And I was also texting one of my really good friends, Diane, who was also pregnant at the time. And she was just super helpful and soothing to me to get through those moments that I was like, what's happening? Something's happening. So shout out to Diane. She was a doula and now she's a coach. And so she knows a lot about pregnancy and labor and delivery and all that good stuff. So she was just so supportive to me during that time. I'm so grateful, and always, but also like that time was so intense, and just grateful to have supportive people in my world. So that Saturday morning, Todd and I decided it would be nice to take a walk, and we walked to Starbucks. And man, you don't want to see people you know when you are getting contractions because you really can't talk. So I ran into someone I knew and I was like, hold on one second. And I had to put my head down and just like get through the contraction, breathe through it. And then I came out of it, 90 seconds later. I'm like, hi, how are you? I'm in labor right now, I think. I don't know, maybe. I think I am, but who knows if the baby's ever coming out. But yeah, hi. It was just kind of comical. And so Todd and I got our coffees, and throughout the walk, I have to stop because I'm having contractions, on and off. I'm stopping on people's mailboxes, like full blown, like, screaming, breathing, but not screaming, but just making these like really deep toning sounds. I probably sounded like a wild animal. I would like tell Ty when one was coming on, and he would have to hold me up if there wasn't like a solid mailbox around or someone stooped to like rest on, and he was just holding me up, and I would squeeze his arms and just breathe. It was wild. And I'm like, okay, this is something's really, really happening here. I think. And side note, I have the baby on me right now breastfeeding. So if you hear his breathing in the background, and his little sounds, that's him being cute. So Saturday early afternoon is here, and I am alone in the house for a few hours. My mom was out, Todd was out, and I was like, okay, I'm not having anything really consistent happen right now, but I I'm going to get in the tub and see what happens, because they say if you get in the tub and you still get contractions, that means you're really in labor and it's not just like some pre-labor thing. So I was still getting contractions in the tub, and the tub was so soothing. And my friend Maggie, shout out Maggie, she sent me this app that you have to download if you're, going into labor. It counts your contractions, but it also counts your breaths. So you turn it on to time your contractions, and it's counting your breaths for you. And it's getting you into a really good breath rhythm. And when you're not in contractions, it's putting you through meditation. So that's literally the only thing I was listening to. I was in the tub and I was just really tapped in. It was such a meditative space. The sun was shining into the bathroom. It was just a beautiful, beautiful energy that was being created in the tub. And I was just in the flow of my breath, and I was moving through these contractions, and in between contractions, I was completely relaxed. My whole body was relaxed. I was imagining my whole body opening up like a rose. And I had this specific image in my mind that I was visualizing. I had this one rose that was on the altar at my blessing way ceremony, which was my baby shower. And the rose lasted in a bowl alive for like over a week. It was so beautiful. It was fully, fully bloomed to its full capacity. And I was just imagining this rose in my image, in my mind's eye. And I was just visualizing opening up. My whole body was opening up. My cervix was opening up. Everything was opening up. And every breath I took was for that opening. And I was super tapped into that energy. And I was like, I don't know where I am in this process, but I think it's working. I think it's happening. And so Todd came home around 4 p.m. and we were talking about, what to do at that point. And he was like, call your doula, like, let's see what she thinks. So I called her at 4 and she's like, it seems like you're still kind of far apart because the contractions were still not super synced up. There were moments in the tub where they were, but most of the time they weren't in any sort of real pattern at that point. So she's like, I think you're still in prodromal labor. Let's wait it out. And then by 6 p.m., I called her 2 hours later and I was like, I think something's really happening. And she's like, okay, I'm going to come. And she lives an hour away. So she got there by 7 p.m. And when she came to my house, she brought her tub and the peanut ball and something that I forgot to mention, my Aunt Barb, shout out Aunt Barb. She gave me these amazing balls, my prickly balls that I was holding in my hands. They're actually like for your feet. I think you can roll your feet on them. But I heard through my friend Catherine about the combs, right? Like holding on to combs in your hand can really help with the pain and distracting the pain. Plus, we have a lot of meridian points in our hands. I didn't have combs, but I had prickly balls. And these prickly balls were everything to me. I only wanted to hold them when I was, getting through contractions. And, the way I was getting through contractions was squeezing these balls, or at least one of them in my hand, breathing, making sounds, moving my body, doing anything I could to just, get through that 90 seconds to 2 minutes. So contractions, if you don't know, they last, my little dinosaur over here, they last about, get it, buddy, get it. They last about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and then you have a break for a couple minutes. Thank God. It's like a wave that comes on, right? And the wave starts to swell and it builds and it builds and it builds and it peaks and then it crashes and it comes down. And that's exactly what a contraction is like. And hey, if we can only get through the challenges in life the way that I was getting through these contractions, man, it was really wild. I was doing it and I was holding my body up in all these different positions when I wasn't in the tub. I was on my hands and knees. I was leaning on my dresser. I was leaning on my bed. I was leaning on so many things. And you really need to strengthen your body for labor because you really are putting yourself in so many different positions. It's crazy. And one of the most important things when you're in labor is to be in an environment where there's no stress. Be in an environment that's very soothing and relaxing. And that is what helps the contractions continue to, show up and do what they do. And so I remember before my doula got there, sitting in my room, listening to my meditations, and I can hear my mom and Todd downstairs cooking dinner, and I can hear my mom saying, to Todd, they're just worried about her. They're just worried that, she's going to have the baby in the car or something like that. I heard something and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I'm screaming downstairs. And she's like, your friends are texting me. They're worried that you're not going to the hospital soon enough. And I was like, tell them that this was my plan. Like, this is my birth plan. Like, I know what I'm doing. Even though I obviously didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that it wasn't time to go to the hospital. And I knew I was going to be following my intuition. And I knew that I would know when to go. And I was just like screaming downstairs, tell them to trust me. Why don't they trust me? And I was just like freaking out that they didn't trust me. And I'm sure this bout of stress that came up was not helpful to my contractions. But what had come up was that I needed to trust me. I was saying, why don't they trust me? It was more about me trusting myself. And so that was the lesson that came through later on after I processed everything. But what happened was during that time, my best friend was texting me because during my blessing way, the gift that we gave to everyone was candles for them to light a candle when I was in labor and to say a little prayer. And so my best friend, drafted this whole email to send when I was in labor. So she's texting me saying, do you want to send it? Do you want to send it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I wanted to send it, but I didn't know where I was in the process. I didn't know how long, like how far into my labor I was. I didn't know how much longer I would be in labor for. And I was very hesitant to like send that email. because I knew people would probably text me even though it said not to. I knew that people would be thinking about it and maybe worry about me. And so I just was like, I didn't want any of that negative energy or like worry energy thrown my way during labor, even though that was the opposite of intention of why we got the candles in the first place. It was for everyone to send good vibes. So I was a little bit stressed about that email too, but she ended up sending it out anyway. And I'm glad that she sent it out because everyone was sending good energy. And that's what I told my mom. I'm like, just tell them to send good vibes. That's all. So anywho, that little thing, I think, delayed some of my contractions a little bit. It's no one's fault. It's just that it was a lesson that I needed to learn, right? Because it was all about me trusting me. I almost felt like this whole labor delivery process was so transformational. It was like almost like a video game. Like I had to collect lessons at each little part that I went through to get to my final destination. You know, like what did Mario collect? Mario collected mushrooms, right? So like every little lesson was like a mushroom that like advanced me to my next level of labor. It was wild. So after my doula arrived around 7 p.m., we were just laboring together. I had made sure that I ate dinner. My mom made hamburgers. I really wasn't hungry, but I forced myself. And I'm laboring around the house, and between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m., I didn't feel like much was happening, to be honest. I was just laboring around. Of course, the contractions were coming. My doula gave me some massage and we just relaxed. And, every time I got a contraction, I felt like she was watching me. I felt like everyone was watching me. Todd, my mom, everyone was just watching me. It was like all eyes were on me. And of course, because I was in labor, and really what was happening is they were all holding space for me. But I just had this feeling of being watched, and it was kind of uncomfortable for me. And I felt like things weren't progressing because I just kept feeling like almost like I had to perform or something was like about to happen that wasn't actually about to happen. And they were just waiting. And it was very uncomfortable for me. But let me just pause the story right there because I forgot to mention something. When I hired my doula, she was super pregnant and her due date was beginning of September. And she was like, I'll be totally ready to rock and roll by the time your due date rolls around. Let's do this. I didn't think anything of it. It was so aligned because I hired her because she offered everything that I wanted in a doula. She was going to labor with me at home and at the hospital. She had a birth tub. She is a mother of 5. She was going to encapsulate my placenta. She was going to do a belly binding ceremony for me postpartum. She also included postpartum in her visits. Like her package was extensive. And it was definitely the most premium doula package. I had interviewed about 6 doulas at this point. She was number 6. And so most of the doulas were, half the price of the package that I bought with her. But I figured, okay, this is going to be great because it includes literally everything that I would want in a doula and in a package, because I was going to seek those things out, like placenta encapsulation anyway, and maybe postpartum support anyway. So she included it, which was amazing. Plus she included, a bunch of one-on-one sessions together, including a home visit before, we gave birth, to set up the plan, to set up all the what-if scenarios and yada, yada. Okay. So when she came to my house for one of our visits, she brought her baby, which was amazing. He's so cute. And she had mentioned that, with previous clients, she had brought her baby to births before. And, would it be okay if she brought her baby to my birth? It's okay either way. She said, if not, I'll just pump and my husband will get bottles and it'll be fine. And honestly, I know myself, I would be worried about her baby the whole time. As she's at my house, I would be thinking about him, making sure, is he okay? Is she okay? Is she feeling like, caught between the baby and me? I would just be more concerned about her baby than me being in labor. And so initially my thought was, I think it would be better to not have the baby during labor at my house. So when I called her to come to my house and we decided she would come, she told me that her baby isn't taken to a bottle and she would have to bring him. Meanwhile, I'm in labor, so I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, it's fine. It'll be fine. And, that was one thing that was just not anticipated. And I'm sure for her, it was not anticipated either. She didn't think that he wouldn't take a bottle. But he came, and honestly, he was an angel. He was such an angel, and I feel like he kind of ushered in Maverick, Earthside to some degree. I feel like it was good vibes having him there, and it was a beautiful thing. And so while she's at my house, her baby's also there. I honestly didn't even notice the baby was there. I didn't hear a peep from the baby. My mom held him a little bit. She had him. He was sleeping. I mean, I really didn't hear anything from the baby. So baby is there while all this is happening. So anyway, back to feeling like I'm being watched. I'm like, okay, this isn't progressing. Nothing's really happening. I'm so tired. Remember, I didn't sleep at all the night before with those contractions happening. I'm like, I'm going to go upstairs and lay down and just like see if I can fall asleep. Now, similarly to when I was in the tub earlier that day, when I'm by myself, things were moving. Things were happening. And it felt so good to just be in my own space by myself. It was like almost enjoyable for me to labor alone, oddly enough. So I'm laboring alone in my room by myself, trying to go to bed. But as I'm trying to go to bed, what's happening? The contractions start to pick up. And as the contractions start to pick up, I'm starting to make a lot of sounds. I'm starting to be loud. I'm, moving around, and the doula heard me, and so she was on the couch resting, and she came upstairs. And at that point, at 11ish, I got into the shower. I got into the hot shower, and I remember losing my mucus plug, and I remember feeling like, okay, things are really happening. And I'm laboring in the shower for a very long time. I'm like really leaning on the walls. I'm, putting my leg up on the wall. I'm just doing all these motions. My elbows are on the wall, my hands are on the wall. I'm just moving around as much as possible. I'm letting the water hit me, and I'm in it. And it's dark in the bathroom. We have a candle lit. It's steamy. I'm just trying to give you the visual of what's happening. And the doula was in there, and my mom stopped in, and Todd was there. And I mean, I'm naked in the shower. It is so vulnerable, right? I'm like uncontrollably making these sounds that are coming out of me that I have no idea, right, how I'm even making these sounds. I have a video that my mom took of me at one point, and I'm like, wow, that does, like, I wouldn't even know how to make those sounds, right? They're just moving through me. I'm connected to my breath, and I'm in the shower, and I feel all of them in there holding space for me, but also watching me. And what came through to me, which was such a powerful lesson that gives me the chills, was that I deserve to take up space. And when it clicked into my mind, I said it out loud, and I was banging my hand against the shower wall, and I was just like, I deserve to take up space. I deserve to take up space. And the doula was like, yes. And my mom was like, absolutely. And it was just a really, really beautiful moment, because it clicked in for me that before, when I was downstairs and I felt like I was being watched, what was really happening was that I was actually being held, and I was afraid to take up that space. And, doing the work that I do in the world, being a coach, being someone that people come to frequently for help and support, sometimes it's hard for me to receive that back. And so it was a big lesson around taking up space and being able to receive being held in that space of immense vulnerability, probably the most vulnerable moment of my life at that point, up until that point, until I actually was pushing. That's a different story. That's a different level of vulnerability. But man, it was so profound and so impactful that had happened. And so after I got out of the shower, I got that lesson, I moved on to the next level of labor, and I was really starting to have a lot of consistency in the contractions. I'm leaning against my dresser, and it just clicks in my head. I'm like, okay, it's time to go to the hospital. What time is it? And it was like 2:45 a.m. I'm like, okay, we've been laboring here all day long and now all night. And now it's time to go to the hospital. So Todd frantically packed the car and we're getting everything together and I'm trying to get myself dressed. And my doula turned to me and said, I won't be able to go to the hospital with you. And honestly, it didn't really click in for me at any point up until that point because I just assumed that she was going to go to the hospital. I assumed that maybe her husband would pick up the baby or whatever. And she's like, yeah, I have the baby. Like, there's no way that I can go to the hospital with you. And I'm just like, okay, we got this. Let's go. Right? Like, I'm in labor. I'm rolling with it. I'm totally just rolling with it. I really didn't think much about it until after the fact. And, we had met for so many sessions and we had talked about every what if scenario. We had talked about what happens if I have the baby quickly and at home. What happens if I have to transfer to a more local hospital? What happens for this? What happens with that? What are all my plans? What are all my preferences? But we never once discussed her not being at the hospital with me. And so it was definitely disappointing because there was things that I wanted a doula at the hospital to fulfill on my plan and preferences. And one of those things was extended cord cutting, which I'll get to way later in the episode. So in the moment, though, I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't even really thinking clearly. I was just like, I'm having a baby. Like, we got this. Let's go. And we left. And so the car ride was an hour exactly on the dot. My mom followed us. Todd and I were, screaming at each other. Just kidding. We weren't. But my friends had made me a video and Todd was loading it for me before we got in the car. And he's like, please watch this video. All of your friends and family, they want to give you messages for you as you go into labor. And it was like the sweetest video ever. It was so, so, so special. I could not focus on it at all because I'm like in labor. And I was like, I'm going to have to come back to this at a later time. And I did. And it was just like such an amazing video. I'm so, so grateful for every single message that I received. It was beautiful. And we're driving there, and in the car, I had probably, I really didn't count, but I had probably 7 to 8 contractions. So there wasn't that many contractions. But when you switch spaces, it's common for your contractions to stall a little bit. But it made me nervous because my whole goal was to labor at home for as long as possible and then get to the hospital and be super dilated. But at this point, I have no idea how dilated I am, how effaced my cervix is, where my baby's stationed on my pelvis. I have absolutely no clue where I'm at in the process. But I'm just praying and praying and praying that I am more than 4 centimeters dilated. For some reason, that was a number in my head. I wanted to be more than 4 centimeters by the time I reached the hospital. And so we pull up to the hospital and we're kind of bickering back and forth. I'm like, drop me off. He's like, no, but I want to go with you. Let's just park and we'll go together. I'm like, no, drop me off. And I'm like, no, okay, park. So we park, we go in together. I am having contractions on the way in. I'm like out of a movie having really, really intense contractions entering the hospital at 4 a.m. And because I'm in such intense contractions, they bring me right back. They put an IV in my arm or just like a place for an IV because I told them I'm going natural. I don't really want to be hooked up to anything. And they were like, okay, we just put the port in your arm and, just in case you need it, it'll be there. I'm like, okay, fine. It didn't hurt at all. I was concerned that the IV was going to hurt. Check that box off. It did not. And then she checked me and I was 6 centimeters dilated. And I was 90% effaced. And he was stationed in a really, really good spot on my pelvis. And I literally cried happy tears. I was so, so happy. I was so, so, so happy. I was so proud of myself. I was so fired up. I was like, let's fucking go. I got this. We're doing this. Let's go. So they told me I was being transferred to the floor where, labor and delivery. And that my nurse was really, really good for people who wanted to go natural. So I'm like, sweet, amazing. And meanwhile, as I'm in this like triage area, I'm hearing someone across the hall like screaming bloody murder. She was screaming so high at the top of her lungs. I wanted to go in there and coach her while I was in labor and be like, girl, we need to bring it down to the roots and like not freak out, because when you freak out, when you have contractions, you're creating more pain for yourself as opposed to dropping into it, leaning into it, allowing them to be there. And always remembering that there's a difference between pain and suffering in labor and in life, right? And I always had that on my mind as I was moving through the contractions. If I was teetering on the edge of suffering, I would remind myself that I could breathe through this and work through them and not suffer through them. And I had invested a lot in my labor education. I was gifted by a special friend a program that I took, a 12-week program that was amazing and super educational. And I also bought this program called Pain-Free Birth. And so I learned a lot about labor and how to really allow yourself to feel everything and not be in excruciating pain. Anyway, that's a side note. So I hear this lady screaming. I'm like, oh, sending her love. And I'm going upstairs to my room, and I had been manifesting a room with a tub. There was only 2 rooms with tubs in the whole labor and delivery floor, and there was one available for me, which was amazing. And the tub was so great, super clean. It had jacuzzi jets. It had railings for me to hold on to for the contractions. It had different lights that I could put on. I left it on this really like pretty blue ambient light, and it was just perfect. It was a perfect scenario. So I get in to the room. I meet my nurse. She's only on for like another hour-ish, and she's really great. She doesn't bother me much. I'm in the tub. I'm totally free. And because I opted to have intermittent fetal monitoring, I wasn't hooked up to anything except every about 30 minutes or so. I had to get out of the tub, and they had to check on the baby's heart rate and all that good stuff. So everything was looking good. I basically labored in that tub from, I would say, 4:15 a.m. till about 6:15 a.m. And Todd was sleeping. My mom was in the bathroom with me. We were playing my playlist, and every contraction, I was just going deeper and deeper into myself. And I was breathing, and I was so tapped in. I was on my hands and knees and just holding on, but also letting go and making sure in between I was opening myself up, letting go of any like thing I was holding on to in my physical body. And I was actually having a great time. We were dancing in between contractions. I was dancing in the tub. My mom and I were just flowing together, listening to the music. And it was fun. She was massaging my back because I was really tight in my upper shoulders because I was on my hands and knees so much and on my elbows so much that it was really tightening my upper back. So she would help to loosen up my back a bit. And I mean, I was feeling so empowered through these contractions. I was feeling so powerful, and I was feeling so connected, and I was moving my body in a way that was just really beautiful. And I was toning, and I was tapping into all those times that I had worked on with plant medicine with my soul sisters and Stephanie. Shout out Stephanie and Lauren and Catherine and Jen, who helped me so much with my expression and allowing myself to move and tone and be heard, and all of that was coming out. And it was just really a powerful feeling to move through each contraction with whatever I needed to, to have come up physically and spiritually. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, was that the spiritual connection that I felt during labor with Maverick was so powerful. And I kept telling him that he was doing such a great job, and I was cheering him on. I was giving affirmation, and I was just talking to him within myself and really just feeling super connected to him because I knew that he was doing just as much work as I was doing. And so I did feel really connected to him during the whole labor process, which was super cool. And I didn't know if I would feel that way. And I just felt like he was just doing so much work and that he knew exactly what to do to come out. So after 2 hours, I was ready to come out. I was ready to be checked by the doctor, and she checked me and I was 7 centimeters. So it took me 2 hours to inch up to another centimeter. And I was like, okay, all right, we've still got this. Let's go. And I actually recorded this video that I sent to my friend. And I'm going to post that video on my story to promote this episode. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can go check it out on my Instagram at thequantum.coach. But I'm going to just share a little clip of it right here, right now. So this is what it sounded like.
I'm doing it, bitches. I'm doing it. 7 centimeters right now. I'm just riding the waves. Breathing. I'm actually having a good time. Listening to your tunes. Whoa. This is gnarly.
Okay, if you want to watch the rest, it's on my Instagram. It was gnarly though. It was wild and amazing. And I was feeling so empowered in this moment and just like, I've got this. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And after I got checked, I remember my nurse was telling me that her shift was ending and a new nurse was coming on. And that new nurse's name was Grace. And I was like, ooh, Grace, this is amazing. Her name is Grace. Okay, that's the vibe, Grace. So when that nurse was leaving, she said something to me that I don't recommend anybody, if you're a nurse, especially labor and delivery, to say this to your patient. She didn't mean it in a negative way, but it did get in my head. And she looked at me and she said, when your water breaks, everything you're feeling is going to intensify and it's going to go from 0 to 60. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Because the way I was operating in labor was from this intuitive space of I don't know what I don't know. And I was just doing the damn thing. And as I was doing it, my body was acclimating to its next level of intensity. And as the intensity built, I was acclimating to the sensation that was occurring. I was deepening my breath. I was melting into it as best as I could. But when she told me that, it did get in my head. So I got into the tub after she told me that. I was in the tub for another 2 hours. Grace came on duty. We were intermittently monitoring, fetal heart monitoring throughout my time in the tub. And I got out of the tub and it was about, I think it was about 8 a.m. at this point. And I am beyond exhausted, right? I've been up for two days now. And I'm just extremely exhausted and my body's shaking, my muscles are shaking. And every time I would get out of the tub to be monitored, I would be leaning on this big birth ball that was on my hospital bed. And I would just lean on it and allow the contraction to come over me. And it was getting definitely more intense. My water had not broken at this point yet. And after those 2 hours at around 8 a.m., I had the doctor check me again. And she was like, you're pretty much 8 centimeters. Like, you're pretty much at 8 centimeters. You're pretty much there. And I'm like, oh my God, I just labored for another 2 hours just to get 1 more centimeter. And it was defeating, honestly, in the moment because I had thought I was there. And I'm like, okay. I looked at the doctor and I was like, how much longer do you think, it's going to take me to get to 10? Because you can't push until you're at 10 centimeters. And even then you have to wait to push until you get that sensation to push. And she looks at me and she says, it could be as quick as an hour. It could be as long as another, 4 to 6 hours. I physically couldn't hold my body up for another 4 to 6 hours in the way that I had been going about it. And in that moment, I looked to Todd and I said to him, okay, I'm ready for my epidural. I honestly never thought those words would come out of my mouth because my plan was to go as natural as possible. And I think one of my biggest fears was arriving to the hospital, not being very dilated, having to get an epidural because things weren't progressing. And then the epidural would slow things down. And then I would need Pitocin and then and then maybe I would need a C-section. I was like going through all those cascade of interventions in my mind. And of course I had a little bit of fear around the epidural because, they're putting something in your back. There's things that can happen. But when I looked at Todd and I said, okay, it's time for the epidural, I had never been more sure of anything in my life. It was such an empowered decision. And that really was like such a lesson for me. It was like, okay, I need to do what's best for me. And circling back to one of those very first lessons in the process of, telling my mom to tell my friends, have them trust me, but it was really about me trusting myself. This is part of that. It was about me trusting myself, that I would know what was right for me in that moment, that I would know what was for my highest good, for my baby's highest good in that moment. And I knew that putting my body that was, at that point just beyond exhausted through anymore was not going to be what I needed. I needed to sleep. And so that was what my hope was. And so, of course, by the time I requested the epidural, the anesthesiologist was very busy at the time. It took him almost an hour to get to me. So I requested it around 9, and then he didn't get to me till 10. So when you decide you want an epidural, make sure you tell them, because most likely the anesthesiologist is going to be with somebody else. But during that time, I'm still laboring, and I'm out of the tub now, and I'm leaning on this birth ball, and I'm just, really, really feeling all of this on another level. And because I had already decided that I wanted an epidural at that point, I was basically like tapped out of strength that I was using to get through these contractions. So they were hurting more than ever. And I was kind of, more than teetering into the suffering. I was really feeling like, so much suffering through each contraction. And I couldn't wait till the anesthesiologist, to get to me. And so finally he arrived, and I'm nervous, right? Like, this wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but it was a very empowered decision in the moment, and it felt right. So I was going with it. And that's another lesson, right? Sometimes things don't go to plan, and you need to adjust and stay true to what is actually true for you in that moment. And oftentimes we need to be flexible in order to give ourselves what we ultimately need. And what I ultimately needed in that moment was rest. And that was my intention for getting the epidural. My plan was to sleep, so that I could gather some strength for the next phase and level of this labor process and birthing Maverick. And so when he gave me the epidural, I remember getting really, really anxious and a bit fearful of like, okay, this hurts, and he's in my back, and dear angels, please guide him, provide him the perfect spot for everything, direct him, like protect us. There was a lot of protection energy that was in the room. And as soon as it was done, right away, it was a huge difference. That shit really takes away the contraction pain. It's like, wow, what a world of a difference to get that. Now, once I got the epidural, I'm hooked up to everything. They're fetal monitoring me constantly. I have an IV. I'm getting fluid. Like, I'm hooked up, and I don't have the same mobility and freedom that I did have before. And at this point, you're not allowed to eat anything. So up until before, I could eat whatever I wanted. Now you can't eat anything. So as the epidural starts to do its thing, I wasn't able to sleep. Why wasn't I able to sleep? Because my whole body was just shaking. And I couldn't tell if it was just my anxiety from getting the epidural, or if I was just reacting to the medication. And the doctor assured me I'm reacting to the medication. My mom was trying to soothe me. She was rubbing my head. She was just telling me that it's going to be okay, just trying to like relax my body. And it worked to a certain extent, and I was able to relax, and I just drifted off and allowed myself to kind of be with it. We turned the shades down. It was dark in the room. The diffuser was going. Todd and my mom took a little rest. My mom was on the chair. Todd was on this couch. And I'm just in the darkness, in my own process. And I just felt this really big presence of my dad, who had passed away, next to me when I was like in this moment. Like, it was completely dark in the room, and I just felt his presence really, really strong on my left side. And that felt nice. And I don't even know how much time we were there for, but I know that I got the epidural around 10 a.m. and by 12:45 I was starting to push. So I remember the doctor coming in and checking, and something that was happening after I got the epidural was every single time I got a contraction, the baby's heart rate would drop really, really, really low. Like so low that every single time the doctor was running in to just check and make sure everything was okay. And it really freaked me out in that moment. I was scared because I wasn't getting monitored that closely during every contraction when I was in the tub. They were doing just like basically a non-stress test every 30 minutes. So it was a different kind of monitoring where this time it was like constant, and every single contraction without fail, his heart rate would drop like dangerously low. And I was really nervous, and I kept looking at the thing saying, Mom, what's the number? What's the number? And then it would come right back up. And they were like, okay, it's okay. And the nurse was really great. I mean, she was great the whole time. I felt like I was the only patient there. I felt like I was the only one having a baby that day. I swear to God, I was treated so beautifully. And at this point, my contractions weren't super, super close together. They were kind of farther apart. They were still happening, and I could still feel the contraction because I started to feel it in my butt. TMI, but we're talking about giving birth, so I don't know if there actually is TMI. But anytime I would get a contraction, I would just feel like this deep, deep pressure in my booty. And so one of the times that the doctor came in to check on the heart rate that was dropping, I was getting nervous because sometimes they say, when the heart rate drops like that, they have to do interventions. And something that she suggested was, do you want to do some Pitocin, which I did not have at that point. And she's like, it would move things along quicker. And I said, I'm going to think about that. Key word when you're in labor, you don't have to give an answer right away. You could just say, I'm going to think about that. And I called my doula and I talked about it with the nurse. And the conclusion was every contraction I was having, his heart rate was dropping. So why would I want to have Pitocin to have more contractions for his heart rate to potentially drop even more than it already was? So I did decline the Pitocin. And sure enough, next time she came in to check me, I was 10 centimeters and my water had broke. She was going to come in and break it, and she checked and she was like, oh, your water broke. And so my water broke. I was 10 centimeters and I didn't have this like extreme urge to push yet, but I did feel like that pressure in my butt. And they say that that's kind of how you know it's time to push. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. He was stationed at a decent spot in the pelvis, but he could have been stationed a bit lower before the pushing began. And one of the reasons why I didn't want an epidural was because I wanted to be able to push in a lot of different positions. And something I forgot to mention was I had asked the doctor to give me a low dose epidural because I wanted to be able to feel what I was doing when it came time to push. So when the time came to push, I actually could feel my legs and I could actually move around. They gave me a squat bar and I was able to get on my hands and knees, which is very rare for some women when they have an epidural. And I was able to, use my strength to squat. And I had Todd behind me helping me. I was in a million different positions. I was on my sides. I was on the squat bar because, the reason I wanted to be free and be able to move around and move my body was because everything I read said, do not push on your back. It doesn't make sense to push on your back. And that made sense to me hearing that. Like, it doesn't make sense to push on your back. It's like the place where you have the least amount of leverage for pushing. And all of that made sense to me. And I've also did a ton of research around breathing your baby down. Oh, just breathe your baby down. Your baby's going to come out if you just breathe your baby down. I'm like, okay, I'm breathing my baby down. This is not going to help my baby come out. So I had honestly wished that I did more research on pushing itself because I felt a little bit lost in that. And I do wish my doula was there especially for the pushing part, because that's where you need a ton of coaching and you need someone who knows what the fuck to do to help you get it done, as fast as possible. I have friends who said, okay, I pushed for 20 minutes. I did 2 pushes and the baby came out. I can't even imagine that. Hopefully my next labor will be like that, because that would be amazing. So anyway, I start pushing and the doctor says to me, we have a mirror. Do you want me to bring it in? And I'm like, hell yeah. So she rolls in this big mirror, and I am seeing parts of myself that I have never seen before. My mom is definitely seeing parts of myself, parts of me that she's never seen before. And even my husband. I mean, I'm bearing all right now, and I'm seeing it, and holy shit, let me just say. And no, I did not shit when I was pushing. I don't think I pooped when I was pushing because like those days of being like in prodromal labor or whatever, pre-labor, those contractions I was having, I was actually going to the bathroom so much, I probably had nothing left. So holy shit, meaning like this was intense. This was so, so intense. I could feel everything. It's as if the epidural wasn't even in use anymore. Like I could feel absolutely everything. So as I started pushing, the doctor's like, "Oh my God, I can see he's low. Like I can see him." And she kind of like helped me see in there that he was in fact pretty close. And every single time I got a contraction, I would start pushing. So the contractions, like I said, they weren't super, super close together. So I had to wait in between. So it was a nice little break in between. But I kind of wish that they were, because it would have made the pushing phase a bit shorter. But I was fine with it. Like I said, I wasn't going to do Pitocin. And the doctors were a little concerned about how the baby would do when he was going through the actual birth canal with the heart rate. Thank God when I was pushing, his heart rate did not drop with the contractions. I'm so grateful for that, because that would have freaked me out. And he was doing so, so good during this phase of the labor, as he was in all phases, because he's perfect. Let's be real. So as the contractions were coming on, they were coaching me to push. And the way that they were coaching me to push went against everything that I had researched about pushing. They were like, okay, when the contraction comes, you are going to bear down. You're going to hold your breath, and you're going to push like you're taking the biggest shit of your life. And that's exactly what I did every single time, no matter what position I was in. And I would try and get like 3 solid pushes out of that. And so you're holding your breath and you're bearing down. You're like, it's very much like that. And you're pushing with all of your might. And I was giving it all I got. And every single time I did a big push, I would look in the mirror and see 0 progress. And I'm like, what is happening? Nothing. I'm like, nothing's happening. They're like, you're doing so good. You just made so much progress. I'm like, where? What? How? Like, what? Like, I don't see anything. And Todd was there. My mom was there. Todd's holding up one leg. My mom's holding the other leg. This is when I'm on my back. And to be honest with you, I tried hands and knees. I tried squatting. I tried side laying. I tried all of it. The only position that was making progress, like a lot of progress, was on my back. I know, crazy. Everything that I learned about pushing ended up getting flipped on its head, and I just listened to what the doctors were saying, and I pushed on my back as hard as I could, and an hour went by, and I'm like, where's my baby? And another hour went by, and I'm like, where's my baby? So we're 2 hours into pushing, and of course some progress was made, but I was feeling a bit defeated. And not to forget to mention, I was beyond starving. I had not eaten anything for so many hours, and I was so hungry that I had literally no strength. I was like, I need protein to push. Like, pushing takes all of your energy. And I had none because I really didn't sleep that much, and I hadn't eaten. And they were giving me juice, and the juice they were giving me was giving me sugar, but it was amplifying the heartburn that I already had. It was like crazy heartburn that made me want to throw up. And I almost did a couple times, but I didn't, thank God. And yet I'm starving. And so at one point my mom had to sneak me a banana. I know it's like such a no-no, but I needed something in my stomach. And I was just ravenous. Like, literally, I remember just being like the hungriest I've ever felt in my whole life. And I needed that energy to do the thing that would make the difference. But I somehow, some way, was able to keep pushing with no food in my system. I mean, even a banana, it's like straight sugar. It was insane. And I feel like every pregnant woman who is pushing out a child understands what I'm talking about. If you were hooked up to any epidural because you're not allowed to eat just in case you need a C-section, yada, yada, yada. But I know that there's people that can relate to me right now of never feeling as hungry as you were when you were in labor, pushing out your baby. So there's that. Okay, so back to the progress that was being made during these intense pushing hours. I remember like just seeing a little bit of his hair coming out, and he wasn't crowning fully yet, but I could just see a little tiny sliver of his head, and it gave me enough strength to keep going. And I was concerned when I was pushing. I'm like, how long do you let people push for before you have to like do an intervention? I was just looking at what was happening and what was not happening, and I was genuinely concerned that he wasn't coming out. And just for the record, when this was all said and done, Todd looked at me afterwards, and we were sitting there with our baby, and he was like, I definitely didn't think he was going to be coming out through your vagina. Like, he was holding my leg up, my mom was holding my leg up, and he was just dead serious looking at me after the fact. He would never say that during the process of pushing. But afterwards, he was like, I did not think it was going to come out that way. I was like, and my push present, so valid. No, I'm just kidding. No matter how your baby comes out, you deserve a freaking birth present. Let's not call it push present because not all moms push. Birth happens in a lot of different ways. So let's just call it a birth present, a labor present for carrying a child for 9 months and bringing it from the inside of your body to the outside of your body. Okay, back to the scene of the pushing. Me saying I was concerned, but the doctors didn't seem concerned because every time they were like, you're doing so great, you're making so much progress, and they just kept saying the same thing about the progress, and I'm like, where's the progress? Okay, whatever, I'll take your word for it. And at one point, over 2 hours in, they start like changing their outfits, and they're putting on different like smocks, for blood and whatever. And I'm like, are we really that close? They're like, yes, we're close. And then all of a sudden they started noticing that there was a bit of meconium in my amniotic fluid. And so they were a little bit concerned that he maybe could have swallowed it. And so they had to call the NICU to come into the room for when he was born, because if he swallowed it, he probably wouldn't let out a cry. And if we didn't hear it cry, then they were going to have to take him to the NICU. So of course I'm like a little bit worried about that, but you can't be worried about too much in that moment because you just have to keep pushing. And I was pushing and pushing and pushing, and everyone's cheering me on. And 2 hours and 40 minutes later, he came out. All of a sudden, it was like as soon as this like head started to come through, his whole body just came out with it. It was just like whoop, one big exit out of the birth canal, out of the vagina. And it was just like, holy shit, I just fucking did that. It was so crazy. I couldn't believe it. And they gave him to me right away. And he was crying his little heart out, which was the best sound in the world because I knew that he didn't have to go and the NICU people left. And they put him on me and he stops crying immediately. And it's just this beautiful, amazing connection. And I'm just like, oh my God, my baby. I'm like, my baby, my baby. I have a little sound clip that I'll play from that moment right now for you. Oh, and I forgot to mention, as soon as he came out and they put him in my arms, I had one hand on his head, one hand on his butt. He literally took a huge poop in my hand. I'm like, okay, this has to be good luck right now. Like when a bird poops on you, it's good luck. So when your child comes out the womb and poops on you, it's got to be the luckiest thing in the world. And here's another little sound clip from when he was just fresh out the womb.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Cute. Oh my God. Look at him. Oh, that's your daddy. That's your dad. Look at you. Oh my God.
Let's go hang out with you.
Okay.
Let go of your dirty blanket.
So they were holding him up and then they put him on me, and it was just the most blissful split second of my life, because as soon as they put him on me, then the doctor's working on me down there, and she's getting my placenta out. I birthed my placenta right away. And then she's putting her hand into my uterus, taking out pieces of the placenta because it didn't all come out. So I have him on my chest and I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like, ow, oh my God, ow, what are you doing? Like it was like a duality. It was a moment of duality because I was just like so happy to have him on me. And he was finally here. And at the same time, I was like going through it with like whatever she was doing down there. She was trying to get out all the pieces of my placenta. And I did have minor tearing that she stitched me up. And that was quite painful. So I was kind of in that moment of dealing with that. And then I was also wanting him to get all of his cord blood. So that was one of my preferences, was that he would receive all of his cord blood and I would have delayed cord clamping, cord cutting. So that was something that I wanted the doula specifically there for, because, in that moment when everything's happening at once, my mom and Todd are there and we're just wrapped up in this moment together. And I didn't want them to have to worry about making sure that these preferences were, being fulfilled on. I wanted the doula there for that reason, because she knows what I wanted. She knows we had this whole plan in place, and I then had to take over and worry about, is my child getting his cord blood? So that was concerning to me. He did get it, but the delay that I was looking for was much longer than the delay that they did. I'm still a little upset about the fact that I think that he had more cord blood to receive, and that was really important to me. It was one thing that I really, really wanted. I wanted him to get everything, because there's like such rich nutrients and blood and stem cells that are in that cord blood that you want your baby to get, because that's like their blood supply, So that was really something that I still am trying to get over, even 3 months later. And he's great. Thank God he's so healthy, so vibrant. He's so happy. And I still wish that he would have got even more of it. I don't even know how much he got because I couldn't even like focus on it. But I remember asking the doctor, is his cord white? Is it still pulsating? I just wanted to make sure that he got a significant amount of it. And of course, his daddy cut the cord, which was great. He has beautiful belly buttons, so good job, daddy. And what's crazy and amazing and miraculous is that when they put the baby on you, within like 10 minutes, the baby is looking for your nipple. It is looking for food. It's unreal. And something that I focused on when I was pregnant was anytime I was in the shower, I would just send love to my boobs. I would send love to the milk that would sustain my child. And, I've heard a lot of different people's experiences with breastfeeding, and I really had no idea what to expect for myself. But I told myself that I was not gonna stress myself out with breastfeeding, that if my milk came and my baby latched, amazing. And if they didn't, then it's okay. And I would figure it out and we would do formula, and I'm not gonna stress out about it. I'm not gonna put pressure on myself to have to be one way, because I don't know what it's gonna be. But I would send love to my boobs and thank them for filling with milk, and I would thank the milk for sustaining my child, and I would really manifest it without putting pressure on myself, because I just was really open to whatever happened. And I feel so blessed that, within the first 10 minutes, he latched right away. Like, he didn't even have a hard time latching. He latched right away, and he was sucking away. And I remember saying to the nurse, I don't know what he's sucking on, because I am pretty sure nothing is coming out. Because I remember trying to like harvest colostrum before. I probably wasn't doing it right, and nothing came out. And so I had pregnant friends tell me that like they were dripping when they were pregnant, even before they had, the baby here. And I'm like, yeah, nothing like that's happening to me, but we'll see. And so they gave me this hand pump to prove to me that there was in fact milk or colostrum coming out. And so I was definitely in awe of this miracle that was happening in my body, with being able to sustain my child with milk from my body. It was just, still is mind-blowing to me. 3 months later, I'm still breastfeeding, and he's exclusively getting my breast milk. So I'll go into my whole journey with it on a follow-up podcast of my postpartum journey. So yeah, so that was amazing. My mom actually took a picture of his first latch, which was it's such a beautiful picture. And breastfeeding is just such a beautiful thing. And I know that not everybody gets to experience it the way that they wanted to or expected to or thought that they would. And I know how devastating that can be. And my heart is with you if you experience that. And at the end of the day, obviously, we just want to feed our kids and make sure that they're getting nutrients and growing strong. And ultimately, that's all that matters. But your dream of breastfeeding also still matters. And we never want to discount that or discard that. So I see you and I feel you. And I'm sending you so much love. After all of that happened, we had our golden hour, which is where we just do skin to skin for an hour plus with the mom and baby, and then daddy does his afterwards. And it was just amazing. It was blissful. It was a dream come true, and the most beautiful moment of my life, like really. And I feel like I get to have one of those moments every day now, just looking at his face and watching him grow. It's like every day of my life, it's the most beautiful moment of my life because I have him. And he's just such a beautiful, beautiful being. And his energy is just, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. He's just really special. And so after we had some time after the labor, my nurse transferred me to our new room, which is where we would be for the next, day or two. We were only in the hospital for 2 nights. And let me tell you, the only things you want after you give birth are your baby, of course, really good food, and a shower. And let me tell you, I ate the best turkey sandwich of my existence. Literally, it was the best thing I ever had. It was turkey and cheese on a croissant, like this seeded croissant. It was unreal. It was the best. I kind of want that sandwich right now. Like I would drive up an hour to the hospital and get that very sandwich because it was that good. My mom and dad think it was that good because it was after I didn't eat for so many hours. But let me tell you, I ate that sandwich and I ate it again the next day because it was that good. It was so good. Those are the only things you really want after you give birth. Am I right? Amen. I'm right. There had been a lot of synchronicities. One, my nurse's name was Grace, which I thought was much needed, right? Always a lesson of leaning into grace and compassion. And 2, my son was born at 3:59 p.m. I was born at 5:59 a.m. So we both have the 59, which is super cool. And like the moment he was born, our sports team, the Eagles, they won the game. And they had been on a streak ever since he was born. And now they're in the Super Bowl, which is super cool. They're probably going to win the Super Bowl. I'm putting out those vibes. I don't know when this is going to be released, but they could have already won by that time. So, woo, go Birds. And we get transferred to our room that we're going to be in. And guess what the room number is? Oh, you'll never be able to guess, right? Because you don't know. You don't know significant numbers to me, but the room number was 433. And remember I told you that I felt like my dad was with me when I had gotten the epidural. Well, his house where he lived is 433. 433 Kismet. So anytime I see the numbers 433, I think 433 Kismet. And Kismet means meant to be. So we were transferred to 433 and I cried. I absolutely cried because I'm like, oh my God, like this is such a sign. He is so here with us. He is right here experiencing all of this with us. And I mean, it was just such a beautiful moment. We were all like shook by the room number. And just how in my mind it's like 433 Kismet, 433, everything's meant to be. And it really, really was all meant to be. It really was. Everything that we'd been through was all meant to be, to have Maverick. And we settled into our room. And I just remember, the next couple of days were just a love bubble. It was honestly just the most sacred time where Todd and I were just so present, so in awe together at this creation that we made. We just couldn't even believe that we created this perfect human who is now ours, that we get to raise together. It was just such a magical first couple of days. And don't get me wrong, I felt like I got hit by a bus. Like, I was in so much pain the next day. I was so sore. I was sore where they gave me the epidural. I had a huge bruise on my back. And I think this goes without saying, you're beyond sore down there where you push your child out from. Because, let's be real. That's not something you do every day. Well, it's done every day, but yeah. Okay. Anyway, they tell you don't even look at your vagina after you give birth because it's not going to look the way that you once thought it did. And they're right. I can confirm. I looked, and wow. It does. Trust me, it all goes back. It just takes time. But wow. After labor, all you want is that first shower. But nobody talks about how painful that first shower is. The first pee and the first shower are like, oh my God, so painful. But also you feel so badass because you're like, holy shit, I just gave birth to a human, So it's definitely bittersweet for sure. Not to forget to mention, I hadn't worked out in quite a while. I was doing a lot of workouts in my second trimester, and then third I haven't. But when you haven't worked out in a while and then you do a workout and you really, really are hurting the next day, well, I felt like I did a 48-hour workout. I haven't even calculated all the hours that I was in labor, but it was definitely over 48 hours, and it was just really, really long. But it was for me. It was meant for me. Every single part of that labor I had to go through, I had to experience, like I said, like a video game, like the Mario game, to get to the next level of labor, the level of the lessons that were compounding over all of that time. That labor was long, but it was meant for me. And it was meant for Maverick. And it was meant for my mom and Todd. And it was perfect for us. And although there were a lot of things that didn't go according to my exact plan, like not having my doula there and deciding that I wanted an epidural and him not getting all the cord blood that I wanted him to get, and on, the things that don't go to plan in our lives are the reasons why we become so resilient and powerful in our lives. And so, going with the flow and learning to let go and letting go of control and moving and having that flexibility during the labor process was such a metaphor for the way that I want to show up in my life and the way that I want to show up as a parent and the way that I want to guide my child and teach him to be in the world. And I only can teach that by being that. And so the culmination of everything, the things that went to plan, that didn't go to plan, it's not so much about the details of it all and what happened and what didn't happen. Like, yes, it's important, but what's more important is the way in which we process those details and then decide how to show up moving forward, how we want to rise to the occasion, how we want to respond instead of react to the things that we move through and go through and grow through in labor and in life, baby. And that was absolutely the gnarliest, craziest, most transformational thing that I've ever done. The hardest thing that I've ever done up until that point. And as I'm recording this very moment, it's 4:44 on the clock. And that is just a beautiful sign for me because the angels are listening. They're like, yes, girl, you're speaking some truth right now. You're dropping those quantum truth bombs. Let's go. And I also completely understand now, more than I did on the other side of it, is why women get push presents. Yeah, we deserve them. And I want to give a shout out to an amazing business. A past client of mine opened up a business and it's called Mrs. Push. It's on Instagram at Mrs. Push. She makes push present jewelry. So if you're looking to get some jewelry to represent, your family, she has beautiful, beautiful jewelry, and she sent me a necklace with Maverick's name on it, and I wear it every single day. I love it so, so much. It's gold. It's beautiful. It's holding up so amazing. It looks brand new. I've worn it for 3 months now. Everyone go give her a follow at Mrs. Push. Make sure you send your partners to that page, her website, because no matter how you deliver your baby, you deserve something really good on the other side. And I know a lot of people ask what my push present was. My husband bought me my dream car, which is amazing. He actually brought it home one day in second trimester. He pulled up with my white G-Wagon with black rims, and that's a whole nother story. But it was a beautiful, amazing, huge, crazy dream come true surprise. And on the rims, he was like, "You're never gonna believe what's etched on the rims." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "It says AG Luxury." I'm like, "No, it does not." Like, we had no idea that it said that. I'm like, "No, it does not." And I went outside and I looked at the rims and I'm like, "Wow, this was literally meant for me." My initials, AG. So it was meant to be. The way that the whole car just showed up, it had been on my vision board for 3 years, and it just manifested at the most perfect time in the most magical way. And shout out to my amazing husband for always making my dreams come true, because he literally lives to make my dream come true. Okay, that's dramatic, but he would say the same thing. He really would. And I feel so blessed by that. So that was my push present. Maybe I'll share the video one day of the surprise, because it was recorded and I can hear my baby downstairs talking. It's all so surreal. So to close this episode out, I will say that overall, looking back and processing everything, I feel really, really blessed and transformed in a really powerful way from my whole labor experience, my pregnancy into giving birth, my birth story. I feel really, really, really transformed by it in so many ways, and just beyond in awe of the miracle of our bodies and the miracle of what we're physically capable of, and the miracle of giving life is just like, it's incomprehensible and truly such an honor. I also just want to say that if you're listening to this and you are someone who is struggling right now with fertility and conceiving and having a biological child, or you've been through fertility treatments before, and maybe you feel a million miles away from this dream that you have of becoming a mother or a father or a parent, I want you to know that I see you, I feel you, and I am you, and I know that struggle. I'm sending you so much strength and love, because it takes fucking courage to keep going on that journey. And sometimes it's hard to remember the why you want this, why you started, but just keep connecting with your child on a soul level. And I highly, highly recommend the book Spirit Babies. Spirit Babies was really, really helpful for me during that time and really brought me a lot of light and grace. And to really put a bow on this whole birth story, labor experience, and bringing it back to you, we're all always giving birth to something in our life. We're always in a labor process of some sorts. And when we're giving birth and when we have this plan and when we're working on executing that plan, not everything is going to go to that plan. And yet, the way that it all will take place in your life and the way that it'll all unfold will be its own unique, perfectly imperfect journey. And how powerful would it be if we could all let go of the plan we have in place and trust that our intentions are going to manifest in a way that is unique and perfectly imperfect for us? How much more enjoyable would it all be? How much more easeful would it all feel? And so I want to leave you with that, with those thoughts that we're always giving birth to something. And no matter how windy the path may be to get to your dreams, can you let go a little bit more today? Can you trust a little bit deeper right now? Can you allow everything to unfold and know that it's taking you exactly where you're meant to be at the exact time that you're meant to be it? I'm excited to continue this conversation in part 2 of a podcast all about the postpartum journey, because I had to take all the lessons I learned through my pregnancy and my labor and apply them to postpartum. And so, talking about things not going to plan, the day that we left for the hospital was like the best day of my life, right? We were taking our baby home and I was so excited, and the nurse was walking us out the door and she's like, oh my gosh, most moms are so terrified to go home. And I'm like, I'm ready. I'm excited. And it was just such a powerful moment. And Todd pulled up in the G-Wagon and we were loading him in it for the first time. And I had imagined that moment for so long. And I looked down at the baby and I was like, are you ready for your life, boy? And I have that recorded too. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And while all that's happening and we're getting ready to leave the hospital and bring him home, I get this call from my mom and she's hysterically crying. And she told me that she fell in CVS. And the paramedics were there and the ambulance were there and they're taking her to the hospital and she feels like she may have broke something. And she's freaking out and I'm upset because, she was so excited. She was getting our whole house ready for us to come home. She had pajamas laid out and she went to CVS to print a picture of the baby that we had taken the day before and have it for us at our house, which was like the sweetest thing ever. And here she is saying that she feels like she broke her arm or her shoulder and she doesn't really know what's happening. And so, she came here to help us, and now she is injured, and our whole world kind of got flipped upside down there. And so I'm going to leave that as the cliffhanger to the postpartum episode to go into all the learnings that came and what actually happened with my mom the day that we came home from the hospital. So stay tuned for part 2, which will be the postpartum journey. Thank you so much for listening. Baby Maverick wants to say hi, obviously. He's in the background. That's all the way downstairs. He's really finding his voice. I hope that this resonated with you. I hope that you were able to take some of the lessons that came through during my journey and apply it to your life. And if you have any feedback or support, tag me, let me know, message me. I love it when you reach out. It means the world to me. And like I said, I'll see you in part 2 of my postpartum journey.
Woo! We did some work today. Thank you so much for listening. You know I love my BAM fam. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who you know would love it too, because we live for the ripple effect over here. And how can you best support the show? Make sure you're subscribed, hit the 5 stars, and leave a review on iTunes, and let me know how the podcast has impacted you. I love being part of your real-time journey, so screenshot the episode and tag me and my guests on Instagram at Manifest with Ash. Now say it with me. I am my own power source. I am the master of my own energy, and I deserve everything that I desire. We don't just talk about it over here, we be about it. Now go get 'em.